Compton and the surrounding cities of Southern California in the early 1990s existed under a constant hum of fear. Gang allegiance defined neighborhoods, silence was survival, and homicide was not just common, it was expected. In this environment, violence was a language, and those who spoke it fluently often did so without consequence. Regis Deon Thomas emerged from this world as a member of the bounty hunter Bloods, a figure shaped by intimidation, loyalty enforced through bloodshed, and a belief that witnesses could be erased as easily as targets. Long before police officers would be gunned down, Thomas had already crossed a line that foreshadowed everything that followed. On January 31st, 1992, Carlos Adkins was slaughtered inside an apartment in Torrance, California. The slaying was brutal, direct, and deliberate. Thomas was arrested for the homicide, and for a brief moment, it appeared that accountability might follow. But the justice system was about to collide with the brutal realities of gang retaliation. Before the case could move forward, a key witness was hunted down and shot in the back of the head on a Los Angeles street, silenced permanently. Another witness recanted, the fear unmistakable and unspoken. With the case hollowed out by terror, prosecutors were forced to dismiss the charges. Thomas walked free, not because the crime lacked evidence, but because violence had once again proven stronger than testimony. The dismissal of the Adkins case did more than free Thomas. It sent a message through the streets. Cooperation meant death, and the system could be bent through intimidation and homicide. For Thomas, this outcome reinforced a dangerous sense of invincibility. The streets whispered what the courts could not say aloud. The rules no longer applied. Law enforcement remained unaware that this earlier failure would soon culminate in an attack that would permanently scar an entire police department. As 1992 faded into 1993, Thomas moved through Compton and surrounding areas as a man untouched by consequence. The groundwork had been laid, not only for further violence, but for an escalation that would cross a boundary rarely breached. What came next would not be a gang dispute, a personal vendetta, or a random act of street violence. It would be an execution aimed directly at the authority meant to contain the chaos. On the night of February 22nd, 1993, at approximately 11 p.m., Compton police officers Kevin Burrell and James McDonald initiated what should have been a routine traffic stop. Burrell, 29 years old and a 5-year veteran of the department, had already served on countless patrols. McDonald, just 24, was a reserve officer working his final shift before transferring to the San Jose Police Department. Neither could have known that this stop would become the darkest moment in Compton Police Department history. Regis Deon Thomas exited his red pickup truck and immediately opened fire. The attack was sudden, overwhelming, and merciless. The officers were knocked to the ground under the barrage. What followed was not panic or retreat, it was methodical. Thomas approached both men and shot them in the head at close range, execution style. The scene was not just a crime, it was a declaration. 2 officers lay slain on the street, their deaths marking the first and only line-of-duty homicides in the department's history. The impact was immediate and seismic. The city reeled, and the Compton Police Department entered crisis mode. The slayings shattered the illusion that law enforcement was untouchable, sending fear through both officers and civilians alike. A massive manhunt began, driven not only by outrage but by the understanding that failure was no longer an option. A dedicated investigative task force was formed, including detectives Timothy M. Brennan and Robert Ladd. From the outset, Thomas emerged as the primary suspect, but finding him was only part of the challenge. Witnesses were terrified. Rumors spread faster than facts, and the streets closed ranks. Investigators responded with an unconventional and aggressive strategy that would later be known as the Dragnet. Instead of quietly pursuing leads, authorities publicly named multiple suspects tied to the officer slayings. The tactic was calculated. By exposing these individuals to public scrutiny, police forced them into a corner where surrender became safer than remaining on the streets. The strategy worked, and its effects rippled outward. Before Thomas was even captured, 5 men were arrested, leading to the resolution of 3 unrelated homicides and 2 attempted slayings. The pressure dismantled a network of violence, revealing crimes that might otherwise have remained buried. After weeks of raids across San Pedro, Gardena, and Los Angeles, 7 locations in total, the walls closed in. On April 6, 1993, Regis Deon Thomas surrendered. The manhunt ended, but the most dangerous phase of the case was only beginning. The courtroom proved to be just as treacherous as the streets. As the prosecution prepared its case, fear moved freely among witnesses. The earlier dismissal of the Adkins homicide had already demonstrated the cost of speaking out, and now the stakes were even higher. Violence followed cooperation like a shadow. The most critical testimony came from Calvin Cooksey, described by prosecutors as the linchpin witness. Cooksey testified that Thomas had bragged about slaughtering the officers, speaking of the act with chilling confidence. But the consequences were swift and devastating. In retaliation for his cooperation, Cooksey's mother was shot and slain. The message was unmistakable. No one was beyond reach. Cooksey later filed a lawsuit against the city and county, alleging officials failed to protect his mother after promising relocation. The homicide underscored the price of testimony in a world governed by fear. Inside the courtroom, intimidation took its toll. 3 eyewitnesses were unable to positively identify Thomas during trial. Prosecutors argued that the failure was not uncertainty, but terror, an extension of the same violence that had erased witnesses before. The case unfolded under the weight of silence, with every word spoken carrying potential consequences beyond the courtroom walls. Despite these obstacles, the evidence held. In 1995, a jury convicted Regis Deon Thomas of 2 counts of first-degree homicide for the slayings of officers Burrell and MacDonald, and 1 count of second-degree homicide for the earlier slaughter of Carlos Atkins. On August 15, 1995, Thomas was sentenced to death. Years of appeals followed, stretching across decades, each one revisiting the violence, the intimidation, and the fear that defined the case. In 2012, the California Supreme Court unanimously affirmed the sentence, closing the final legal door. Today, Regis Deon Thomas remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. The legacy of his crimes endures, not only in the names of those he slew, but in a police department forever marked by loss, a community shaped by fear, and a case that exposed how far violence can reach when silence is enforced through homicide. The story of Regis Deon Thomas is not only about the lives he destroyed, but about the cost of terror when justice itself becomes a target.